Hey everybody, welcome to this Blitz tutorial, and we're going to be covering how you can add favorites and remove favorites for a user on a Tableau site. So there is a more detailed version of this video as well, and that one's going to also cover how you can query the existing favorites for a user and flatten the nested data that's returned from that into useful information. So we'll skip over that in this video. We'll focus just on the adding favorites or removing them. So we can see that there are some favorites for the user I'm logged in as. I've favorited this one project, and then I went into a different project and I favorited all the content in here. So we'll have a project in the favorites basket, we'll have a flow, a data source, and 2 worksheets. All right, let's take a look at the REST API reference really quickly and just remind everyone that really all that we're doing with the tableau-api-lib library, which is the library we're using in this video to make everything happen, all that we're doing in that library is just tapping into the Tableau Server REST API endpoints that are available to us. So it is really useful whenever you're trying to do something like with favorites. You might want to give this a quick read and see what all is happening underneath the hood, because that'll help you understand the limitations of what you can and can't do. So in this case, it looks like all we can really do for our favorites through the REST API is list the favorites and add or remove favorites for a user. So hopping into the code, all of this will look familiar if you've worked with the tableau-api-lib before. If you haven't, then I recommend you check out the Getting Started video that's linked in the description. That explains everything that's happening here. And basically we've established all the information we need to connect to my Tableau Online site, and then I define an instance of this Tableau server connection and I sign into it. So now that we're signed in, we can take a look at 3 different things. First is who's the user that we want to add favorites for or remove favorites for, and then what's the content type that we are going to be making a favorite for. You know, is it a workbook? Is it a data source? And then finally, what is the ID for that content? So let's take this step by step. And so for starters, let's get a list of the users that exist on the site so we can just cherry pick the ID from one of these users and query their favorites, just to give you a glimpse of what that looks like. So let's go ahead and execute this. By the way, this function is brought to us by the querying section of the tableau-api-lib library, which just returns us a data frame containing details for all of the users on our site. All right, so we do that. We find all these users. We get the IDs that we need, and I'm going to use one of those IDs here to just query the favorites for the user that I was actually signed in as. So if you want some information about how you can extract the useful pieces of information embedded in this data frame that's returned to us, then check out the detailed version of the video where we go through all of this. But for now, I'm just going to skip to the part where we're adding favorites for another user. So that was querying a user that already had favorites. Let's take a look at that other user on my site who has no favorites. And what we're going to do is add a favorite for that user. So I've got a workbook in mind from the favorites that were queried above. I just figured out, let's grab one of those workbooks. Another thing you could do is if you knew you wanted to add a favorite for a workbook, but you didn't know what the workbook ID was, you could always use some of the other querying functions in the tableau-api-lib library to just pull a pandas data frame filled with details about all of the workbooks on your site. So there are also videos on that subject. And now all you need to know is that we do have the workbook ID that we want to make a favorite for this user, and we have the user's ID. And then we need to just come up with a unique label. Unique meaning on your site you don't have another label that's the exact same text. So maybe this is even like the workbook name or some kind of, just come up with some kind of naming convention that's going to ensure the uniqueness on your site. So if I run this, we can take a look at the response that's returned to us from the server. And so this is going to give us all the details about the favorite that we just added. And then if we wanted to, we could come up here and we could query what are the favorites for this user now. And we could see that indeed there's a workbook that's a favorite. So just one single row. And then if we wanted to remove that favorite, all we need again is the workbook ID. So that's the workbook that's been favorited for the user, and then the user ID. And we use this delete workbook from favorites method. And if I didn't mention it before, don't want to leave this one out in the cold either. Add workbook to favorites. Both of these methods are named after the endpoints which exist on the Tableau Server REST API. So if we looked at the REST API reference, we would find something that's basically named the exact same thing here and here. So now if I run this, if it's successful, I should get the 204 response code, and that's just deleting that favorite for us. And if I come back up here and I run the favorites for this user one last time, we can see that once again they have nothing favorited. So that's a wrap for this tutorial, and hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you want more in-depth information about this process, check out the detailed video. It's linked in the description. So we hope to see you in future videos as well, and good luck out there with the Tableau Server REST API. Thanks.